is Stephanie, and I'm so glad you decided to join us on YouTube today. We have an exciting message for you today, so make sure that you're engaged, leaned in, and taking notes. Also, be sure to like and share this video, and if you haven't yet, be sure to turn on notifications and subscribe so you can stay up to date with everything happening on our YouTube channel. Now let's jump into the sermon.
I want you to take your Bibles, if you would. Let's go to the Old Testament, and let's go to the book of 2 Kings. 2 Kings, chapter 4, and I will be there in just a moment. 2 Kings, chapter 4. Turn to 2 Kings. Are you there? Yes. Are you trying to get there? How many are trying to get there? Yep, you'll find it. It's all right. Let's keep going. We're going to talk about, we're in this series called God in the Ugly. And a little catch up. Last week we talked about the unavoidable ugly moments and seasons of life. How many of you know there are just some ugly moments and some ugly seasons that we have no control over? Some we do. Some meaning that's poor behavior, poor decision, that's sin in our life. As a result, there's consequences in our life. As a result, what happens? We have some ugly moments and ugly seasons in our life. But some moments and some seasons are unavoidable. How many of you know what I'm talking about? No one likes the ugly, but even as Christ followers, we often experience ugly. The book of Matthew says it rains on the just and it rains on the unjust. The rain, meaning you could pray all day, live at the church, fast, you could do all those things. You're still going to experience some ugly moments and seasons in your life. And some ugly seasons are very obvious. Loss of a loved one, emotional, physical, financial stress, disappointment, discouragement, and even depression. But today, I want to focus on an ugly that's a little more subtle. And I'm going to talk about, for a few moments, the season of empty, the ugly of empty. How many of you know that empty seasons are often ugly seasons in our life? Whether that's relational, financial, spiritual, physical, it really doesn't matter. We all have some seasons of empty. If you're living, and if you're breathing today, if you're not there, let me encourage you, you are going to have a season of empty. Again, many of us are running and living on emotional, physical, relational, and spiritual empty. Many of us are literally, how many of you ever said this? I just feel like I'm running on fumes. Has anybody ever said that? And if you ever been in your automobile and you're about to run out of gas and maybe you're en route somewhere, you're just hoping and praying that you get to a gas station before you run out. Anybody like that? Keep your tanks full and you won't have that moment, okay? But if we're not careful, we will be that way with our emotional, our spiritual, even our physical being. We're just running, that we forget we got to stop and refuel our tanks. If not, we're going to get caught in the middle of nowhere and there's not going to be a station around. Come on. And we're not going to be able to refuel. Well, this morning I want to turn your attention to the screen. I've got two books I want to share with you today. I don't get anything out of this, so they're putting them on the screen. These are two books that I read. One was a few years ago. Both of these are old books, and I've read them both a long time ago, but they were a blessing to me, and they're really good. Leading on Empty, this was written by a pastor. I believe this guy pastors in Hawaii. I don't know how you get on Empty in Hawaii, but he managed to do that. But it's a great read, Leading on Empty. And then the other one is it's really good. Emotionally healthy spirituality. That is a really good book. So they're going to leave that up for a moment, take pictures of that, or write the title down in the name. Those both are great reads. And I don't get anything out of it. I'm just trying to resource you. Everybody say, thank you, Pastor Joe. Well, you're very welcome. So let me get back to my sermon today. We are often overworked, overstressed, overcaffeinated, overmedicated, overwhelmed, and overstimulated by information from all forms of media. We just go and go and go to the point that many of us become dependent on distractions instead of obligations of life. We are overloaded with our schedule. I'm talking about with our career, our kids, church, sports teams, kids, school, relationships, kids, bills, and the list could go on, kids, and it could just go on and on. But because we are fulfilling our responsibilities to everything and everyone else but ourselves, in our relationship with Christ, we unintentionally find ourselves running and living on empty. How many of you have ever run out of gas in your automobile? Did you intentionally do that? Did you intentionally say, I'm going to ignore the gas station? Guys, did you intentionally say, I think I can make it to one more exit? Come on, I think it's 2 cents cheaper 5 miles down the road. But most of the time, we intentionally do not plan to run out of gas. And how many of you know that when you run out of gas, it's almost at the most inconvenient time? It's like any time but now. Anybody know what I'm talking about? It's like now is not the time to have this. It's not that we do it intentionally, it's unintentionally. And that's what happens in our lives when we get empty. We didn't set out to, it's not a strategy, it wasn't our plan. It's just because we are going and going and going and giving and giving and giving and doing and doing and doing. We just wake up one day and we're like, wait a minute, I've got nothing left in me. I can't do this anymore. For some of you, maybe you are there now. Are you emotionally drained from dealing with everyone else's problems? That you don't have the emotional stamina to deal with your own issues in life? Are you giving and are you tithing? And yet when you look at your checking account, it seems like that you got more that's going out and coming in. Anybody ever been there before? Are you so busy doing for God instead of being with God that you find yourself just spiritually empty today? Well, I want you to know that you're not alone. In the Old Testament, 2 Kings chapter 4, the story of a woman who was emotionally, mentally, physically, and most of all, she was spiritually empty. This is a great story. I'm going to share some great truths with you from this story today. But don't just take my word for it. You get in this story this week. Get in your connect groups. Get in this story. It's a great story. I can't share all the truth with you because y'all wouldn't stay with me, okay? But I'm going to read this to you. I'm going to read this story to you. Y'all ready for this? This is a great story. I love the Old Testament. I'm telling you, people who think the Bible is boring, Lord, just read the Old Testament. There's some stuff in there. Lord, turn those soap operas off and get in this Bible. I'm telling you, there's some stuff in there. You're talking about reality TV. Ooh. Here we go. Chapter 4, y'all with me? 2 Kings, verse 1. One day, the widow of a member of the group of prophets came to Elisha and cried out, "My husband who served you is dead, and you know how he feared the Lord. But now a creditor has come, threatening to take my 2 sons as slaves." Elisha simply asked, "What can I do to help you? Tell me, what do you have in the house?" Notice her response, "Nothing at all." Have you been there? You have nothing at all left except a flask of olive oil. I want you to take that word flask. I want you to highlight that. I want you to circle that. I want you to put a star by that. I want you to put that on a shelf because we're going to come back in a moment. We're going to pick that up. All that is a small jar that held olive oil in the Old Testament. That's all that is. Are y'all still with me? Just hang on to that. That's going to be really good later. Okay? I can't share it with you now. Y'all start running. Okay, Elisha said, "Borrow as many empty jars as you can from your friends and your neighbors. Then I want you to go in your house with your sons and shut the door behind you. Pour olive oil from your jar, your flask, into the jars, setting each one aside when it is filled." Isn't this weird? She doesn't have any oil left. Just got this little bit of oil. And he's telling her, do y'all get this? Take your little bit of oil in your one little jar, and all these other jars that you're gathering up, I want you to take what's in one and fill all these up. It's weird, okay? So she did as she was told. Those are the words that every man longs to live here. She simply did what she was told. I'm kidding. Her sons kept bringing jars to her, and she filled one after another. Watch this. Soon every container was full to the brim. "Bring me another jar," she said to one of her sons. "They aren't anymore," he told her. And then the olive oil stopped flowing. When she told the man of God what had happened, he said to her, "Now sell all of your olive oil And I want you to pay all of your credit cards off, and your sons, and watch this, and you and your sons can live with what is left over. Isn't that an incredible story? So in this woman's time of greatest need, put yourself in her sandals for a moment. Imagine, visualize sitting at home this morning. You have no money left. Your credit cards are completely maxed out. There's no food in the cabinets. There's no food in the refrigerator. And your children are crying because they're hungry for food. And you don't know what to do. Well, that's the position this woman is in. She has exhausted all of her options. There's no options left on the table. The only thing that she has left is a small bottle of oil. That's all that she has left. Her kids are hungry. She doesn't know what to do. But as we read in the story, we can celebrate. While we celebrate what God did for her, we can relate to her season of ugly. How many would say that's an ugly season when you don't have any money in the bank, no food in the house, and you're desperate for God to show up, not tomorrow, but today? Empty seasons are often ugly seasons. Many of us, if we're not careful, will find ourselves on empty, meaning there's nothing left. The only thing I have left is this. It's all it is. The real question is, what do we do when we're running on empty and we find ourselves in any one of these areas? That could be relationally, financially, spiritually, emotionally, doesn't matter. When we find ourselves on empty, what can we do? That's the real question, right? Because you already know that you're either on empty or you're about to be on empty. Thanks for your help. I'm going to give you 3 things today. Number one, it's in your notes. So when you find yourselves on empty, number one, don't become bitter. Don't become bitter. Listen to the words. My husband, pick up her tone, who served you is dead. And you know how he feared the Lord. But now a creditor has come, threatening to take my 2 sons as slaves. Do you pick up this, what I call spiritual religious undertone here? In other words, she is doing what we often do, and we have this entitlement-like mentality. When you're empty and you're feeling drained in every way, how often do we think or feel that God owes us, that we don't deserve what we're going through because what we have done for God back here? That's exactly what the widow woman is saying to the man of God. She is reminding him that my husband served you faithfully. In essence, if you read between the lines here, in essence, she is saying, I should not be in this position based on what my husband has done for you and for the Lord. We shouldn't be in this situation. If we're not careful, you and we will feel the same way. It's like, God, I don't deserve this. This should not be happening to me. And then we go through this feel sorry moment for ourselves where we just remind God of our faithfulness. We say, God, we led a connect group. We brought our tithe to the Lord. We came to church to listen to Pastor Joe scream at us every week. We did all of these kind of things. I did all the right things, and yet I find myself in the wrong place at the wrong time. I've been there where I said, Lord, I feel like I've done everything right, but look what's going on in my life. I should not be here, as it hinges on us. That's how we act, and that's how we respond to the Lord sometimes. And what happens is when God doesn't answer us the way we think he should answer, or he doesn't answer according to our timeline, if we're not careful, we start blaming God. We're like, God, this is your problem. You did this. You brought this into my life. And if we're not very careful, watch this, we become bitter in our spirit even toward God. We can become bitter with each other at church. We can become bitter sometimes with the pastor. We can become bitter with the church or each other or our spouse or kid, but even God sometimes. Simply because God did not do what we expected him to do when we expected him to do it. And we're like, God, why am I in this situation? And again, we can easily become bitter by looking for validation, by blaming God for not responding how we think he should respond. So we start blaming God for all this. We think because we have been faithful that all of a sudden now we get to determine God's level of faithfulness and the way he is faithful and the timing of his faithfulness. It's almost like saying, God, because I did all of this, then I'm expecting you to do all of this. How many of you know we cannot expect anything from God? That if God gave, if he never answered another prayer, if he never did anything else for us, how many of you know we've got plenty of reason to praise? But we do the opposite of that sometimes. This woman was now a widow in spite of the fact her husband was a prophet. It was as she was expected to be insulated from the ugly based on her husband's position. And sometimes we're the same way. It's like, God, why is this happening to me? I don't understand this. I have served you faithfully, so why is this happening? Now that she's emotionally empty, experiencing the anxiety of having nothing, not having anything to provide for her family. No doubt she was in an ugly season. And so here's what I would say. When we find ourselves in the ugly of empty, we must not add insult to injury by becoming bitter. Again, it starts with blame, because we got to put the blame on somebody, because we're never going to put the blame on ourselves. So it's always somebody else's problem. It's always somebody else. If they wouldn't have said this, if they hadn't done this, we're always putting the blame on others, including God. And that blame, if we're not careful, that blame leads to what? Bitterness in our lives. Where we come bitter toward God. And if we're not careful, we'll drop out of the connect group. We'll change our friends. We'll change the church. Watch this. And sometimes if we're not careful, we will become so bitter that we'll give up on God. And we'll walk away from our faith altogether. Bitterness, I want you to watch this, is caused by things on the outside, but can destroy you from the inside. So many times it's because what happens out here, it causes bitterness and blame in here, but out here is not what destroys us. Because out here, this comes and goes. Meaning the moments and seasons, situations of your life, these things come and go. But sometimes we hang on to those moments and we hang on to those seasons. So it's not what happened to us that eventually destroys us. It's what we keep on the inside, come on, that is a result of what happened out here that can destroy us. So I can't fix all the time what's out here. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. But what I can fix is what's in here. Come on, I can take my heart to the Lord and say, Lord, today, forgive me for blaming others. Forgive me for blaming you. Lord, forgive me, I have become bitter. And today, I'm not blaming you, but I'm going to give you some praise and thank you for not giving up on me. This good stuff. See, your season will either make you bitter or it will make you better. It will make you weaker or it will make you stronger. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 15 says, watch out. I want you to watch this. Watch out that no poisonous root of bitterness grows up to trouble you. Now I want to unpack this. Can we slow down for a moment? Watch out in Greek, that's translated as inspect or to look carefully. Visualize, you guys watching this? Inspect, look carefully at what's in here. We're so focused on what's happening to us that we forget to inspect and to look carefully at what's happening in us. What's happening to us is not what we need to be most fearful of. What we need to be most fearful of is what's happening in us. Are you watching this? Now, why is it so important that we inspect and we look carefully at what's happening in here? Because we don't want any poisonous root of bitterness to grow up. That word grow up in Greek, it's translated as a gradual process. So you just don't wake up one day a bitter person. That's why today there are people who are bitter, not because of what they're going through, but what they went through with something way back here. And what they did was they allowed that root of bitterness begin the process of growing, come on, and then they water that, it continues to grow, and it matures, and now we are still hung up, we're still bitter, we're still unforgiving of not what's happening today, but what happened yesterday. And that's why the writer in Hebrews says, listen, guys, you have to inspect and you have to look carefully at what's going on, that you make sure that there's no poisoning root of bitterness that's going to take place in your life. You got to deal with it. Because if you don't deal with it, watch this, it's just going to continue to grow. That process is just going to continue to grow until it gets to the point that it's going to trouble you. That word trouble means crowded in or annoyed. That's really good. Y'all are just looking at me. That's really good. Some of us are annoyed. We feel crowded because of something happened back here, because it's not that we hadn't dealt. That thing's been gone a long time. That person has been gone a long time, but now because we allowed something to grow in here. Now watch this. When I allow something in here to grow and it's poison, how many of you know that when you pour something poisonous in your body, it spreads throughout your entire body? So when we allow the poisonous root of bitterness in here, it skews our view, our perspective, our relationship with God, our faith in God, on the church, our connect groups, on and on and on and on. It poisons our thoughts, our behavior. So when you're empty, don't become bitter. Number two, use what you have. Number two, watch this. Elisha said, he's talking to the woman again. He says, tell me, what do you have in your house? This is the most interesting verse to me in this whole story. Tell me, desperate woman who's about to die, what do you have in your house? I'd be like, what do you mean what I have in my house? You need to go to Walmart. If something was in my house, I would have already found what was in my house. She responds with nothing at all except a flask of olive oil. How often do we look to outside sources when everything we need is already in the house? Even if you feel completely emptied and drained, I want you to know there's always a little bit left in you. And when you feel like there's nothing left, there always is. Now, this next story, all of you can't relate, but some of you can. How many of you, I take it on myself when my toothpaste gets like all the way to the end, it becomes a game. It's like me or the toothpaste. We're going to decide today. It's going to be decided on this counter in the bathroom who's going to take home the trophy today. Can I get one more brushing out of that toothpaste? Anybody else know what I'm talking about? It's amazing. We'll spend $15 on a hamburger today, and we won't throw that toothpaste away until we can get every ounce out. So you squeeze it and you squeeze it and you squeeze it. You roll it all the way up to the end. Right? You can put it on the counter and do the palm thing and get more out of it. You can put it on the floor with your, I'm just teasing. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. But my point is, there's always a little bit more. And each time you think, well, surely that's all the toothpaste, until the next morning you look in the mirror and goes, okay, I can get one more. I'm telling you, listen to me. It just needed to be squeezed a little bit. When life squeezes you, we find there's always a little bit more left. But we have a tendency to focus on what we don't have instead of what we do have. Her miracle started with what she already had in the house. Not what was at Walmart, not what was online, but what she already had. I'm here this morning to declare your miracle is already in the house. What you need, what you're looking for, what you're watching for, what you're expecting and anticipating, listen, it's not coming down the road. It's already in the house. The miracle that you need is already there. Now, this is interesting to me. Why would he ask her to pour out the only thing that she had left? That's a head scratcher to me. Because I would be arguing like, Elisha, this is all I got left. Why are you asking me to pour out, like, give me your oil. I'll pour your oil out. But she's like, this is all I have left. I want you to write down this phrase. Are you ready for this? God uses leftovers Come on, somebody. Say it right now out loud. Thank God for leftovers. Come on. Thank God for leftovers. Oh, I love leftovers. Hot leftovers. Cold leftovers. I don't care. I just enjoy leftovers. Come on. There's a reason that we leave them. There's a reason, Mom. Y'all don't know what leftovers are. There's a reason my mama left leftovers. You know why? Because she knew 8 kids was going to be coming home from school. And when you got 8 kids coming home from school, you better have some leftovers. Come on, come 3 o'clock when school gets out, because kids are going to be hungry. There's a reason God left some leftovers in your life, because He knew I got to leave something over in this season that's going to carry you through and carry you over in the next season. So God uses leftovers all the time. There's a great story in the Gospel of Mark how Jesus took a little bit of bread and a little bit of fish, and He fed 5,000 people. But the miracle did not come from Long John Silver's. It came from a little boy that was already in the crowd that day. Come on, I'm here to tell you, your miracle is in the house this morning. What you need is already there. Check this out. Your miracle is not what you have lost or what you don't have, it's what you do have. And some of you may be thinking, I have nothing left. Come on, but you have a little bit of faith. And God can use a little bit of faith. Come on, the faith of a mustard seed to say to this mountain, move from here and move it over there. I have been there where I've laid in bed in the mornings and I've said to the Lord, Lord, I don't have hardly any faith left. But the mere fact that I'm still talking to you says there's a little bit left in my tank. Meaning I'm walking and I'm living on fumes today. But I just want to remind you, I'm still here. And what faith I have, I'm going to exercise that faith. And I'm going to use that faith in prayer today. I'm here to tell you, if all you have left is some leftovers, you bring your leftovers to God. If you have a little bit of faith, you bring a little bit of faith to God and you give it to Him. Instead of disregarding and ignoring the leftovers. Some of you, I want you to know God can use your leftovers. God can use the leftovers of what seems like a failed marriage and He can restore it. God can use the leftovers of lessons taught to a wayward child who can still come back. Come on. God can use leftovers of the pain from your last season to fuel you for your next season of life. So I want you to know that God can use the leftovers of yesterday for today. There's purpose in those leftovers. There's a purpose you didn't die back there. There's a purpose that you didn't give up back there. There's a reason and a purpose God brought you through that, because He said, I got something still for you. So use what you have instead of looking to the sky for like a miracle to fall out of the sky. Look around you, because everything and everyone you need for your miracle is often already there. It's often already there. That's a good word. Y'all better buckle up. It's about to get gooder. I know that's not a word. Don't send me an email. Number 3, it's about to get good. Number 3, trust God for more. When I'm on empty, when I'm out, I have to trust God. My options are done. I've exhausted all my options. I got to trust God for more. I'm going to show you where I got this. Look at verse 5. So she did as she was told. Look what happens. Her sons kept bringing jars to her, and she filled one after another. Verse 6 says, soon every container was full to the brim. Now visualize, this woman only had a small flask, and she was told to go borrow jars to hold an amount of oil that she did not have. When you visualize the tangible pieces in this story, I got this little jar of oil, and I'm being told to go get all of these other jars, bring them into my house, close the door behind me, take the little jar of oil, and fill up all of these jars. First of all, some of us would not do that because it doesn't make sense. And we would be afraid it would make us look like a dummy. What do you mean? Just tell the kids, go get the jars. Are you following me here? Then she had to pour out the little that she had left. Yet the woman did what she was told, even though it did not make sense. And as long as her sons continued to bring her empty jars, God kept the oil flowing. I want you to take note of this. If you trust God and pour out what you have, watch this, He will pour in what He has. Watch this. But God sometimes cannot pour in until we first have poured out. Because the pouring out is a reflection of my trust. It's a reflection of my obedience. It's a reflection of my faith. Watch this. So as I'm pouring out, I'm activating the hand of God to start pouring in of what I do not have. Now, you remember that word flask that I told you to put on the shelf? You thought I got excited and forgot about it. Take it off the shelf. Let's get it on the table. Y'all ready for this? So that jar of oil, when you really visualize this story, it makes sense that she would have a jar of oil still in her house. Because what was her husband's job? What was his position? He was a prophet of God. And a prophet of God would take the oil of the anointing, come on, and pour it out and put it on people's head. He would anoint. This woman saw her husband day after day take that same ball of anointing and pour it out and pray over people and use it, and she would see a miracle in their life. Little did she know that God in the future would take that same oil and that same anointing that her husband poured out, that she would pour it out one day, and it would be a miracle to feed her family. Come on, guys. I'm here to tell you, you take what you have and you pour it out, and when you do, you're activating faith in your life for God to pour something inside of you, listen, that you don't have. But the only way you're going to get what you don't have is to give what you do have. And the reason sometimes we never get what we need is because we're not willing to give what we have. I see this all the time in people's finances, the tithe. They won't give it up in order to get it. Come on. Guys, whatever you have in your life, whatever your need is, pour out. And when you do, you make room for God to pour into your life. Listen, this is so good. Her trust was stronger than her doubt. Because if you look at this from a common sense perspective, you would never do what this woman did. But God is not relegated to common sense. He's not limited to common sense. He's not limited by our way of reasoning. And oftentimes when it doesn't make sense, sometimes it's an indication that this makes God sense. The oil kept flowing until she ran out of jars. By borrowing jars, she simply put feet to her faith. Oh, y'all ready? Y'all not getting this, are you? It's good. It's really good. God always has more to give than we have room to contain. God always has more to give than we have room to contain. So could it be the reason that we never get more is because we're not willing to give what we have? God says, doesn't matter how feeble, how little, how flimsy you may think what you have is. You pour it out to me. You give it to me. And then you stand back and watch me pour in, watch this, what you don't have. So to get what I don't have, I have to give what I do have. Y'all feeling this? To get what I don't have, I got to give what I do have. Well, what I do have is not very much. That's not the question. That's not the issue. That's not limiting the miracle. That's not stopping. That's not hindering the miracle in any way. The only thing that's stopping and hindering the miracle is if the woman would not. And what would happen in this story is she would have never. Well, that don't make any sense. I'm not going to do that. Her story may not even be in the Bible, or it might have been different because she had no faith. She died. Her kids died. We don't know. So I have to pour out what I do have in order to get what I do have. The oil kept flowing until she ran out of jars. Through the outpouring of the oil, the woman was able not only to pay off her debt, look at verse 7, but she says, pay your debts, that's what Elisha said, and you and your sons are going to live off. So after you pay all your credit cards off, you're going to have enough left over that you and your sons are going to be able to live off that. God always gives us more than what we need. The reason the woman experienced the blessings is because she trusted God enough to obey the commandment of the promise or the direction or the instruction by the prophet. I want you to write this down. This is so good. We're going to make it personal. My trusting precedes my blessing. My trusting precedes my blessing. So if I want the blessing, I want to show you this. Y'all got to hurry up and write. I got to move. Okay, watch this. Oftentimes, we're wanting the blessing without the trusting. Okay, who's in charge of the blessing? God. So you can't do anything. You're not in charge of the blessing jar. God is, he's the only one that has, he's the only one that can take the lid off the blessing jar and pour it out on your life. But I'm going to show you this. He's in charge of the blessing, but he is not in charge of the trusting. He can do the blessing for you, but he can't do the trusting for you. The trusting is up to us. So when our trusting is what activates the blessing in our life. And we have to trust him when it doesn't make sense. When this is all you have left, pour it out. When we have less, we can trust God with more. When we have less, we can trust God with more. Bring your less to a God of more. This is all I have, Lord. It's all the faith I have. It's all the trust I have. I'm embarrassed today. It's not very much. I haven't done this the right way. And Lord, but Lord, this is the leftover of my mess. This is the leftover of my marriage. This is leftover of my kids. This is leftover of my family. Lord, this is all I got left. I made a mess out of it. Yes, I should have listened to you. Yes, go through it. Beat yourself up all over again because it does so much good. Just keep doing it over and over and over. But this is all I got left. And bring it to the Lord and say, Lord, here's my less. Here's what I found out. He will always give me more. Isn't that good? I didn't expect to be here. Some of you might think, I didn't expect to be here. Broken marriage, broken dreams, broken home, broken finances, a broken career, and even a broken faith. But trust God for a season for more. Would you stand with me this morning?
Thank you for joining us for this sermon today. If you made the decision to follow Christ, let us know in the comments below or at northwestchurch.tv. If God has encouraged you through this message, be sure to like or share this video with a friend. We'll see you next time.